Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from around the world. It is wonderful to have you with us. We have been doing this now for quite some time. Welcome on board, those of you who are joining us. It's always a pleasure to see many of you tune in for this program. And as I keep saying, the reason why this program has become something of value is because of the importance that you put to it, what you give to it as people of South Sudan. We are doing this as part of civic education so that our people are aware of the root causes of problems that are facing South Sudan and the crisis of governance that South Sudan has been subjected to for many years now. So those of you who are joining us, please welcome, make comments, let me know how the volume is. If we need to increase it, if we need to decrease it, let us know. So welcome. And as you join, please share the video. Share it as widely as possible. Share it on your wall if you can. Share it also, if possible, on Messenger. And share it also, if possible, on WhatsApp. Send it to the groups. So that as many people can be part of this program as possible. Thank you for those of you who have informed me that the volume is clear. This is wonderful. As I was saying, the reason why we are doing this and why we have been doing this now for some time is really to create a conversation. All of you, you know the situation in Juba. There are people, when I read the comments, that ask me, why am I not in Juba? As if these people, they don't live in South Sudan and they don't understand really how situation in South Sudan is. Right now, one of the major problems we have in South Sudan is lack of freedom. In fact, if you look at the Freedom House ranking of countries in the category of Global Freedom Index, South Sudan ranks last, absolute last. It's sort of the same with North Korea and some of those countries. And that is because there is no space for people to speak. People of South Sudan, if they speak, they're punished for their opinions. Many people are detained. That is the reason why Blue House exists, is to prevent people of South Sudan from actually engaging in constructive conversation about their own country. And this is a country that South Sudanese people liberate with their precious blood. And we liberate it with the understanding that it's going to be up to us to build this nation. And to build this nation, it requires exchange of ideas. You can't build this nation simply by just being a psychopath, the way that a lot of Matograp have become psychopaths. There seems to be also a misunderstanding of what I mean by that word when I say Matograp. Some people seem to think that Matograp is someone from Warab state. No. Warab is a different state. Matograp are those people who only do things because of their stomach, is what the French philosopher Bayat called the politics of the belly. These are people that only think about their belly when they think about the country. These are people that have no loyalty to their own families. They have no loyalty to their own clans. They have no loyalty to the Republic of South Sudan. The only loyalty that they have is the loyalty to their own stomachs. These are the Matograp. And I find many of them, they come here, and by the way, they are highly welcome. If you are a Matograp, feel free, you are welcome. You stay here and you listen. So that is what I mean by Matograp. It has nothing to do with anyone from Warab state. There are, of course, Matograp from Warab state, but there are also Matograp from Jonglei state, from every state of South Sudan. These are people that only think about the politics of the belly. So when you think about Matograp, think about those who are in the political bureau, bunch of the people in the cabinet, some of the people in the parliament. These are people that have no loyalty to the nation. They don't understand the struggle of the people of South Sudan. They don't understand the aspirations of the people of South Sudan. They don't understand what it means to build a nation, what it means to be loyal to a cause. Their only loyalty is to their own stomachs. And that is why I said These are the experts of the politics of the belly. They think about their own bellies, and when they think about politics, they think the purpose of politics is to fill their bellies as much as possible. This is what Salva Kiir wants to turn every South Sudanese into. And that is why there is lack of political space in the country to actually talk about issues and engage in a constructive manner about how can we build a strong state in South Sudan? How can we build a people-driven economy in South Sudan? Those conversations are not happening. And it's not because people are not there that knows what to say or ideas to contribute. There are all kinds of South Sudanese people, and they're experts in their own fields. But they are being suppressed. They are being prevented from actually exchanging ideas with their own people. And that is why we come online, those of us that have been forced out of the country, those of us that the security agencies and President Kiir has sworn to do away with, we are not going to give him the satisfaction of killing us. That would be not a point. We don't mind being martyrs, but when you go into martyrdom, that is not the objective. The objective is to prevail, is to win the cause. So we are not going to be in a place where we can hand ourselves to Salva Kiir and give him the satisfaction of doing away with us. So that is why we come here online, we talk here online, and we know our people are watching because we are in a new age. This is the new of technology. You don't need to be on TV for you to get your ideas out. You don't need to be on a radio to get your ideas out. Social media has changed the world, and we believe that this change is going to have enormous benefits in South Sudan. So as I was saying, brothers and sisters, those of you that have joined us, go ahead, please, share this video with as many people as possible, and make your comments. Even if you are a matograph, write your comments so that you may be educated. There are some people that are matograph out of ignorance, but there are people that are truly matograph out of desperation because they are only loyal to their stomach. But we know that this country would not exist if people of South Sudan were only loyal to their own stomachs. We would have betrayed the cause. John Garang would have gone back to Sudan long ago and accepted any position that was offered to him by the Khartoum regime. But he was a dedicated guy. He was fighting for the freedom of South Sudan. This freedom is what has been now diverted by Salva Kiir, who is trying to build a dictatorship in South Sudan, and who is using violence, intimidation, in a very brutal way to intimidate people and to turn them into psychopaths. He's also using resources and subjecting the people of South Sudan to poverty, a man-made poverty, so that he can turn them into matograph. So those of you who have refused to be made into matograph, we salute you. We know there is a struggle all the time. But not long after a struggle, ones get to wear the crown of victory. And I assure you, that crown is coming very soon. So my people continue to be very strong and continue to be loyal to the cause of our people. This is a cause that generations upon generation of South Sudanese have fought for. They have struggled in a very strong way, in a very dignified way, and we are the heir to those struggles. And it's now our duty to take the struggle of the South Sudanese people to another level. Now, the topic we are going to talk about today, we are going to talk about the South Sudanese pounds, the South Sudanese currency, the SSP. As you know very well, South Sudanese pounds is the legal tender of South Sudan. It has been existing since 2011 when we got our independence from Sudan. You know very well back when we were in Sudan, what we had at the time with the Sudanese pounds, which was the SDG. This is what is still being used in Khartoum. But when we became independent, we created our own currency. Now, if you all remember, at the time of independence, our currency was basically one-to-one with the Sudanese pounds. And when it was converted to the US dollars, it was more like 2.4 South Sudanese pounds to $1. And then eventually, it increased until it reached to 2.96. That was the rate at which the central bank was selling it. And then now the commercial bank And the Forex Bureau was supposed to sell these dollars at the rate of 3.17 South Sudanese pounds to a dollar. That is the way that it was supposed to happen. This is the way that it was operating across the entire country. Now, just to take a step back, any one of you that have studied economics or even live a life, because you don't really need to sit in a classroom to understand the fundamentals of economics. Everything in economics is all about supply and demand. If the demand is very high, that means if a lot of people want that same product, the price is going to go up if the supply remains constant, right? So if the supply remained the same, and this was something, let's say you were supplying 50 goods, and these 50 goods were being bought by 200 people, there would be a price. But let's say now the number of people that want goods increased from 100 to 1,000, and the supply of goods remained the same. You still have only 50 goods. Then what is going to happen? What is going to happen is that the price of good is going to go up, right? Because more people want it. And if more people want it and the supply remains fixed, the only thing that is going to happen is the price have to adjust. That is the way in which the market comes to equilibrium. Now, conversely, let's say the demand remains the same, but the supply goes up, right? So if the supply goes up, the product becomes cheaply available, and there's too much of it that is available, then the prices would have to go down. Because now there is too much of it, and the people that want it are the same number of people. So obviously, that is what happened. That is how the market adjusts. It's based on the supply and demand. And this is essentially without the intervention of the government. This is what Adam Smith called the invisible hand, right? That is how the market allocates the resources, right? That's the way it works. In labor market, let's say there are 50 engineers, and then the jobs of that are looking for engineers are 50. Obviously, everyone will get a job, but let's say the jobs that are available are only 30. That means now the demand would be very high and the supply is low, and then the rate at getting that job is going to change, right? That's fundamental of how everything in the world works. Now, when we got our independence in 2011, at the time, South Sudan was producing about 350,000 barrels of oil per day, right? This was at the time when we just got our independence. The Sudanese government of Omar al-Bashir has made huge investments. The oil was really at its peak, 350,000 barrels of oil per day. We were getting, on average, per month, about $400 to $600 million per month on a monthly basis, consistently. This is the amount of money that was coming into the coffers of South Sudan. This was the amount of money that the Treasury was receiving through the central bank. Now, I want to make something clear, first of all. Now, when the oil is sold, we know that you have the Ministry of Petroleum, you have the Ministry of Finance, you have the central bank. Now, when the oil is sold, the products for which the oil is sold belongs to the Ministry of Finance, because the Ministry of Finance has the constitutional duty of being the custodian of the resources of South Sudan, right? Because the government of South Sudan is the custodian, and that job is delegated to the Ministry of Finance. So when the oil is sold and this money comes in, the money essentially belongs to the Ministry of Finance. Now, because we are an independent nation and we are not United States of America, we cannot use US dollars because we have our own currency in South Sudan, which is the SSP, the South Sudanese Pounds. That is the legal tender in South Sudan. So if you want to buy anything in the market, you have to use South Sudanese Pounds. Now, South Sudanese Pounds is not owned by the Ministry of Finance. South Sudanese Pounds is owned by the central bank, right? Central bank is the one that controls this currency. So now when the oil is sold, of course, in hard currency. It's sold in dollars. We receive the dollars. But the Ministry of Finance can't spend it in dollars. So what the Ministry of Finance does is then to sell it dollars to the central bank. And then the central bank will give it the South Sudanese pounds, right? And this is based at the rate, right? And as I said before, it's all based about the supply and demand, right? If you leave everything to the market, the supply as well as the demand that is available in the market are going to determine what is going to be the price, what is going to be the rate of exchange between the US dollars and the South Sudanese pounds, right? That is the from the very beginning, right? So at the time when we got our independence, South Sudan was selling $1 to the Ministry of Finance. So this is the difference now, the official rate. The Ministry of Finance was selling its dollar to the central bank at the rate of 2.96. And then now the central bank, because the central bank is essentially not supposed to make profit, then makes that available at the same rate to the commercial banks and to the Forex Bureau. And the Forex Bureau and the central banks, the Forex Bureau and the commercial banks, which are for-profit organization, when they buy these dollars from the central bank, they are supposed to make a slight profit, and that profit is supposed to be controlled, because now what is happening is they're getting it at a lower rate than really it is the market. So then they're supposed to then add only a slight amount on top and then sell it, make it available in the market at the rate of 3.17, right? Now, the reason why it happens like that is because of the exchange rate regime that South Sudan practiced at the time. Now, exchange rate regime is basically a policy in which a government manages its currency or manages its exchange rate. If you take, for example, here in the United States, the Federal Reserve, here in the United States and many of the democracies in the world and well-functioning economies in the world, the currency is entirely free. It's floating, freely floating in the market. So its rate of exchange to other currencies is determined entirely by the fundamental of the market. Central bank does not intervene here in the United States. The Federal Reserve does not intervene to prop up the dollar, right? So the thing is entirely flexible. It's up to the market to determine what the price is, right? Now, there are other countries, like if you take, for example, like China, for all this time, the Chinese yuan, this has been a major source of dispute between China and the United States. China artificially keep its currency weak, right? So what does that mean? What it means is that if the currency is supposed to be a bit higher, China deliberately make its currency weaker. And we'll come and talk about it, why this is sometimes important for countries to do that. You know, there are different reasons why you do something like that. But when you intervene in the management of the currency, it's no longer a free floating, right? So there is all kinds of different ways in which the exchange rate is managed by the government. So you have like a managed float. So managed float is like, for example, you allow the currency to fluctuate within a given range so that it doesn't go too high, it doesn't go too low. And when you see that it's going in a wrong direction or a direction that you do not want, you intervene, either by making more finances in terms of like hard currency available, or by taking more of your own domestic currency outside, right? There are monetary instruments that the central bank uses depending on what kind of policy objective it wants to achieve in managing this kind of, in managing the currency. So what South Sudan adopted at the time, you know, and I remember because I was in the center of this discussion at the independence. I was the World Bank country economist at the time, and we were engaged in advising the government of South Sudan on how it was going to manage its new currency, the South Sudanese Pound. And there were all kinds of consideration. One of the things that was considered at the time was having a free float, or having some kind of like a managed exchange rate, or entirely fixing the exchange rate to $1 in terms of a currency board, right? So what happened with the currency board is the central bank pledges never to change the supply of the domestic currency unless it can also change the availability of foreign exchange at the same rate, so that the price never changes. It's the same all the time. You tie your hand. You cannot intervene in the management of the currency and in the manipulation of the currency, depending on whatever economic outcome that you want to achieve. That was one of the things that was proposed. Now, it was discussed by the cabinet, and ultimately the decision that was made was that South Sudan was going to have some kind of like a fixed exchange rate that would be pegged to $1, but central bank will have the freedom to intervene and adjust it depending on how the fundamental of the markets were turning out. Right? So that's what happened. So immediately if you remember, we got our independence, and then now we have to do the currency change. So we had to get rid of the SDG, which is the Sudanese pounds, and we have to introduce the South Sudanese pound. And it is immediately where the problem began to happen. What do I mean by what happened? Remember, you have to go to central, there was banks or certain places where if you have your SDGs, you bring them and then you are given the new currency, and it was at the same rate. It was a rate of 1-to-1, right? So you will come to a commercial bank or to a central bank or to a forex bureau. There were like number of places that were made available through the entire country, and there was a certain period of time that was given for all the citizens of South Sudan to exchange their money, because a lot of people in South Sudan keep cash. They don't have bank accounts, and they don't go and put this money in the bank. So they were given a certain time so that they will have enough time to be able to change this money into the new currency. So people will go and exchange, and this is a lot of money, right? You're talking about potentially like billions and billions and billions of the Sudanese pounds being changed into the new South Sudanese pounds. What happened? Immediately, corruption. So what happened after the money has been taken into the central bank, the old Sudanese pounds, SDG, has been taken into the central bank. What will happen is that our official at the central bank, and this was at the same time when the national security was being established, these people, after the money that has already been exchanged, has been brought to the central bank, this money now is supposed to not be released, is supposed ultimately to be destroyed, right? They will go and collude with some of the officials of the central bank, and the money that has already been exchanged, that is already sitting in the central bank, is brought out at night, back into the market to be exchanged again. Imagine, right? This really, this business of corruption, has happened for quite some time. So that is the first instant that happened, right? Money that has already been exchanged will walk out of the central bank and then to be exchanged again, and then they get the new Sudanese pounds, right? A lot of people made a killing, right? And there was a lot of entities that were colluding in this, and we became aware of this, and we asked the Ministry of Finance if they were aware of what was happening, and talk with people, and including the presidency, by the way, if they were aware. Everybody seemed to be aware, and it was like an inside game that was happening. Anyway, what began to happen was that now, because the availability of the new currency, the South Sudanese pounds, was higher than what was available in Southern Sudan under the old currency, the Sudanese pound, because of this corruption of money going in and coming out, you began to see a pressure on the fixed exchange rate regime that was now at equilibrium, where the central bank was selling to the commercial bank at 2.96, and the commercial bank was making the money available at a rate of 3.17. So a gap began to emerge. And this is for the first time where the so-called black market began to happen. Now, what did the central bank do? Central bank decided, because at the time we had a lot of reserves. You remember, there was Elijah Malonga Lang, who was the governor of the central bank between 2006, 2005 to 2011. And Elijah Malok was a no-nonsense guy, right? He made it very difficult for people to go and get the money out of the central bank. So by then, South Sudan has accumulated enormous amounts of reserve, billions of dollars reserve that were available. And this is the money that the government could use to make development available, make massive investment, either to build sewage system, to build electricity plants, to whatever, massive investment, because you need reserves, you need money that you can use to make this kind of investment. So a lot of money was available. So what did the central bank do? They began to intervene a little bit, right? Making more dollars than normally would have been available for the market, right? And many people didn't really notice what was happening in the currency market at the time. Okay, and then don't forget, when we got our independence, we had the so-called post-independence negotiations between South Sudan and North Sudan, right? There's a number of issues that we needed to agree. There was the issue of debt. There was a lot of debt. At the time, Sudan owed $40 billion in debt to international creditors that was borrowed by Bashir. There was a question of what is going to happen to this debt. Would it be shared between South Sudan and North Sudan? There was the issue of the pipeline fees, right? Because now we became an independent country, and the pipeline goes through the north. So how are we going to negotiate? How much are we going to pay? That issue need to be negotiated. Issues of water, all kind of issues. Issue of citizenship. These were the issues that now needed to be negotiated. And you remember at the time, President Kiir appointed Pagana Mum to be the chief negotiator with the Sudanese government. And these negotiations began to happen in Addis. I was still at the World Bank, and we try as much as possible to support the South Sudan negotiation team. In fact, this was directly under my leadership. We hired a number of experts to support the negotiations, including people that have been involved in countries that have separated, like what happened in Czechoslovakia when it split into two countries with Czech Republic and Slovakia. So we hired some of those experts that were involved in the similar kind of negotiation to come and support the government of South Sudan through the World Bank. So these negotiations were happening. And the negotiations were not progressing. You remember Bashir was demanding that we will pay him $36, which was outrageous, because if you look at the time, the international average of what countries that are landlocked, that were using the infrastructure of another country, these countries, if you take, for example, Chad, right, is next door. Chad is a landlocked country, and Chad sells its oil through Cameroon. So there is one of the largest pipelines that run from Chad to Cameroon. You know how much Chad pay per barrel? 40 cents. 40 cents per barrel. Bashir wanted us to pay $36 per barrel, which was just completely insane. So these negotiations were not going anywhere. There was also the issues of borders. Bashir started complicating matters, adding issues that were not even really on the table to be part of the so-called disputed borders. Things like Mile 14. Everybody knows that Mile 14 has always been part of South Sudan, right? But all of a sudden, because Bashir was making things very difficult, it was added on into the agenda, right? So these negotiations began to happen, and then what happened in March 2012? Well, the skirmishes on the border. You remember, just as we were approaching independence, Bashir mobilized the Sudan Armed Forces to attack the 2 battalions of the SPLA that were in the north, right? The one that was in southern Kordofan in the Nuba Mountain, and the one that was in Blue Nile. And the war began there, and then the same thing, he was also invading Abyei. So already by the time we got our independence, we had all these crises that were happening. And because these were our allies, these were our brothers, we fought and died together in the liberation of South Sudan. People in Blue Nile, you remember very well, those of you who were in the bush, the role that the sons of Nuba Mountain played, it was enormous. You remember also the role that the Angazana, they played in the liberation of South Sudan. They play a major role. You know very well the role that the sons of Abyei played. They were there 100%, and they died with their brothers in Southern Sudan, fighting for the vision of New Sudan. But because of the failures of the SPLM in the implementation period, in the interim period, the popular consultations were not held in the Nuba Mountain. They were not held in the Blue Nile. The Abyei referendum was never held. And these people, basically, we betrayed them. And all we care about was the independence of South Sudan. And Sudanese people realized that, and they took advantage of that. They knew that South Sudan was going to be independent, so they wanted to crush them as soon as possible. So the war was happening there. And South Sudanese government, the SPLA, obviously, had to intervene and to support, as you know very well, these allies that were in the north. So there was a lot of skirmishes in the border. And also the rebels in Darfur, who SPLA had began supporting since 2002, they were also fighting. And then the Sudanese government was already looking at the rebels. You know, you remember those of Tanginya that had refused to return back to South Sudan. People like Baping Mointwil and those of Puljang, those who were fighting the rebellion that were in the north. They were being supported by the north, by the Sudan Armed Forces to create disturbances in South Sudan. So there were all these border crises, and everything came to a head in April 2012, when the South Sudanese forces took over Pantho, also known as Hijilij. So after that, heading to that, when the negotiations were not going anywhere, what the North Sudanese began to do was to divert the oil. So oil was flowing, and though we did not agree, now Bashir needed money, and he realized that he could strangle South Sudan. So what he did is start diverting the oil and keeping the money for himself, refusing to give us our money. So the cabinet met, and although we were against the idea, they decided to shut down the oil. So oil shut down. And then Pantho crises are happening. So oil shut down in February 2012. By April 2012, the war is getting out of control. What began to happen? Now, it's important for you, first of all, to understand how important the oil was to the economy of South Sudan at the time. Oil accounted for about 70% of the GDP of South Sudan. That is the gross domestic product. That is the overall value of goods and services produced in South Sudan in a single year. 70% of that was entirely reliant on oil. Oil accounted for more than 95% of the exports, right? This is what we were exporting, right? There was a little things that we were sending out, like the timber. There was a lot of timber that was being cut from Eastern Equatoria and some part of the Yei. So that account for something. But really, it was really an oil economy. In terms of foreign exchange, especially dollars, oil accounted for like 99% of it. There was a little that we were getting from visas and people coming into South Sudan and whatever little we were getting here and there. But 99% of currency, I mean hard currency, was coming entirely from the oil. At the same time, the revenues of the government, right? Government 98% of the revenue that the Ministry of Finance used to finance its budget on a yearly basis came from the oil. So we were entirely an oil economy. That is really what we depended on. And with the shutdown, what happened? Everything came down to zero. The amount of currency coming in, zero. In terms of productivity, because the oil has been closed, zero. In terms of revenue, because the oil is shut down, zero. All right? This is essentially what happened. So what did this do? And what were we expecting at the time? We brought in a very large delegation from the World Bank to advise the cabinet that if this is what you decide to do, then you need to immediately tighten your belt. They need to be actually, as we speak, they need to be austerity measures that will be reduced because you don't have revenue to continue to financing this large bloated government. And at the time, the government was just overspending, and it wasn't even clear what the money was being spent on. Payments were still being made on Duro Saga and some of these corrupt activities that had taken place over the interim period. Money was still leaving the Ministry of Finance. Now, funny enough, if you look from 2011, at the time we got our independence, until the time when the oil is shut down, on a monthly basis, South Sudanese government was spending, on average, about $700 to $800 million per month. That was how much. It's crazy when you think about really how much money has gone out of South Sudan. That is how much money was being spent on a very month. And what is surprising, if you go back, and by the way, all of this is available on the internet. Just go to the Ministry of Finance website. You load down the expenditure because you have the budget, the budget plans, and then you have the budget execution reports, and they give you every month how much money is leaving, and it's available both in South Sudanese pound as well as in dollars. Just go and check it on your own. What happened after the oil is shut down, and this is really the point where I want to get in, instead now of expecting us to reduce the expenditure at least by 60 to 70%, in the month of March, April, and May, even June, the spending actually increased. We went from spending about $700 million per month to spending over $1 billion per month. And this is at a time when there is no more revenue coming in, right? We are just only spending your saving. It's like when you lose a job, when you lose your job and you have some saving, you are supposed to reduce your expenditure. You cannot then be increasing your expenditure when you have no revenue, because then what that means is you are going to lose, you are going to run out of your saving very, very fast. And then what are you going to do? That is basically what South Sudan began to do, right? We began by spending. Now, obviously, the money in the central bank is fixed, is a given amount. South Sudan doesn't make dollars, so you cannot just continue to make it, you know. So the expenditure continued non-stop. We began negotiating, and the negotiation became more difficult. Bashir realized that he could wait it as out, because what has happened by then. I talked about this the other day. This is when his boys, NCP boys, the National Islamic boys, had already infiltrated the SPLM and the government. Those of Tutke were already in J1. His boys were already sitting in the presidency. They were sitting in the central bank. They were sitting in the Ministry of Finance. So they were telling Bashir how much money we have available, right? And Bashir figured that he could delay the negotiations for as long as necessary until we will have no choice but to accept an agreement that was actually bad for South Sudan, right? So he had the benefit of the intelligence. And the president was warned about this, by the way, by the SPLA, by the military. They gave him a detailed report. I have seen the report myself, where they warn him of how the NCP has infiltrated all these institutions. And now the last thing that they were talking about, and Bashir, by the way, there was a voice recording of Bashir and his advisors meeting in Khartoum, bragging how they have infiltrated the office of the president, they have infiltrated the central bank, they have infiltrated the Ministry of Finance. And the only thing that was left was the SPLA and the SPLM. And now, for them to completely dismantle everything, these were their next target. The president was brief about it. The report was given to him. The report is right there. And he ignored it. He didn't take any action, which kind of really raised the eyebrows about who really was he loyal to. Anyway, remember, by the time we reach August, September, instead of focusing on addressing the fundamental issues, he released his so-called letter of the 75 people that has stolen $4 billion and asking them to bring the money back, right? Which created all these kind of tensions within the government. By September, we were really running out of money. So we had to agree to, a deal with al-Bashir. This deal eventually was signed as the so-called cooperation agreement, where we accepted to pay Sudan $3.2 billion. We are one of the poorest countries in the world, but here we had really no choice. So we had to pay Bashir, and we had to agree to pay these ridiculous amounts of fees per month. The pipeline alone was more than $9 per barrel. Right? I gave you an example before. What happened in Chad and Cameroon? They pay only 40 cents. We had to agree to $9. And then there were another fees on top, especially if we want to use the refineries from the north. When you add everything up, it was absolutely ridiculous. It came down to about a third of our oil was being given to al-Bashir. Now, the oil, so you are producing at 350,000 barrels per day before the shutdown. Now, with the shutdown, it went to zero. And then now when it was turned on, some wells that were producing could not be turned on again. They could not produce anymore, right? And when you turn it on, you don't just go shoot from 0 to 350. You increase. So we start going up a little bit by a little bit by a little bit by a little bit by a little bit, which means the expenditure here is way too high, and there is no money. And the government, instead of listening to they talk about it, austerity, but in actual budget outturns, if you look at what really is being spent on and the money that is leaving, nothing has changed. In fact, people were misbehaving more than actually being careful about how they were using the money. And then the government thought that they could think outside the box and fix the problem. What did they do? They began printing money, printing South Sudanese pounds. In economics, we call this the monetization of deficit. So instead of reducing the expenditures, they now thought, you know what? we can just print more South Sudanese pounds. Instead of waiting for the dollars and then exchanging the dollars, we could just begin printing. And that's what they began to do. They start printing, and the printing continue, and the printing continue. Initially, it started, they were printing about 200 million per month. And then they increase it to like 400 million per month. And then they increase to 800 million per month. By the time we reach 2013, they just continue printing. And what they don't understand about inflation, it takes time for the pressure on the prices to happen. And especially in a country like South Sudan that is entirely import dependent. Imagine, we don't produce. If we produce something, okay. But we are buying everything from outside. And when you buy everything from outside, you rely on dollars. And then the management, the philosophy of managing the exchange rate did not change at all. It continued pegging the South Sudanese pounds to $1, right? And then now, because of the printing and because the amounts of dollars that are available have reduced, what happened? The price had to adjust. Supply of dollars have reduced. Supply of South Sudanese pounds have increased. So what happened? There was a pressure on the currency, and the gap between the official rate that the government was using, the rate that you could go and buy it at the commercial bank and the Forex Bureau, 3.17. And then the rate that was available in the black market began to widen. It went to 4, to 5, to 9, to whatever, increasing, getting out of control. And the printing is not stopping. And by the way, on this regard, we cannot blame the central bank too much. They were given orders from the presidency, from the president, that they got to print the money because they need to pay the salaries, they need to pay whatever, and they pay contractors and all of this thing. So the president, Wakidit with his hat, is the one managing the currency. He's telling the central bank, print the money. And the central bank said, yes, sir. And they turned the printing on. And that's basically, and then now what happened? Now it all of a sudden created an incentive for those with access to the central bank. If you have access to the central bank, and you could go there and talk to the central bank governor to give you $50,000, for example, at the rate of 2.96. And then outside in the black market, the rate now is 20, right? All of a sudden, you get to make a killing. You get to make a killing. And that money, you pocket it and you go. It's legitimate money, as long as you have access. This is where the your connection begin to pay. So that's what began to happen in a very large way. Now, because as I told you, most of the products in South Sudan, food, for example, at the time, we were producing less than 40% of our own food domestically. That means more than 60% of our food has to be imported. This is just food. Let me not even talk about cars, clothing, all the other products, toothpaste, toothbrush, soap. All of these things have to be imported. And if you're going to import them, you need dollars, right? So what did the government do? And this was actually, the intention was good. It was, okay, since we need all these products and our economy is entirely dependent on imports, let's create a system where people that will get these dollars are people that are really bringing the products in. So they went to the Qatar National Bank and they said, give us a line of credit so that businesses that are buying products from outside can directly go and buy, and then now they can submit the bill of purchases and the product that are coming in. When it is verified at the border, you get to pay them, right? The intention was good. But the problem is, as anything in South Sudan, as I keep saying, it's not about the intention, and it's not even about what is in the plan. The plan has always been there. John Garang died, And he left all the plan. He had the SPLM strategic framework for transition from war to peace. It was there. There was the joint assessment mission. It was there. There was all the projects that were planned under the multi-donor trust fund. They were there. When I was at the World Bank, we advised the Ministry of Finance to develop the growth strategy, how to grow the economy of South Sudan. The plan was there. We also developed the South Sudan Development Plan. The plan was there. We developed the Vision 2040. The plan was there. Problem has never been about the plan. Problem has always been about implementing the plan. Why? Because we have a president who is primarily interested in looting the country. Right? And the people around him that surround him, the matograph that I mentioned to you before, these folks are only interested about their bellies, filling them. So for them, the plan is just there for conning the public and conning the institutions so that they are able to divert the resources and use them for their real purposes. You know, there is a different plan. There is a huge difference between a plan and what is actually revealed, what you prefer in terms of like aspiration and what is actually revealed through your action. And what has consistently been revealed through the action of our president and the government is that the politics they are doing is the politics of the belly. Politics of the belly. That is it. It's all about their bellies, right? So now, Qatar National Bank initially made available 800 million, and then it kept on being extended. It kept on being extended. And instead of actually products being brought in, most of these businesses that was getting these contract, this is what we call, by the way, known as the LC saga, the letter of credit, right? It became a huge corruption scandal where the country was literally looted by all kinds of people. And by the way, this is the money that is being borrowed, right? It's money that is completely being borrowed, and it's a money that will have to be paid back. And it's supposed to be used to actually bring in products so that South Sudanese people are not starving, so that we are able to get medicine. So take, for example, like pharmaceutical industry in South Sudan. All the promises, you know that we don't make any drugs in South Sudan. So all these drugs have to be imported. We have a vulnerable population. We have a cattle industry that is heavily reliant on medicine. But instead of the money being used for those things, what happened was that individuals were getting letters of credit. They were bringing maybe 5% of the product. The rest of the 95%, they were selling in the black market. And then they were making money, you know. The so-called medical industry, everybody want to go to India for medical treatment. You go to India, you don't even really go. All of a sudden, outside the central bank, there is a new industry that prop up, and this is the industry of faking documents. So if you want to have a letter of referral from a real doctor, there is a guy right there sitting with his printer. He can print it to you, and it's signed by some of these very well-known doctors in Juba. You know, you need all these document is all there. You just need to pay them maybe, you know, $20, $30, and you collect all your document. You have all the right document. You go to the central bank. You have your connection. They push this through. It's signed. You get your money. And then printing is continuing. So by the time of December, so before we reach December, and December is a very critical year, December 2013. This is what I'm referring to. Before we reach December, now the donors of South Sudan, and you know that South Sudan has always been relying on donors. The United States, the so-called Troika of the United States, United Kingdom, and Norway, plus the European Union and a bunch of other countries that were giving money to South Sudan. They were very much concerned about what is happening because this is not like something new. If you look at all the African countries that got their independence in the 1960s, you know, this is what they went through. And in the 80s, the World Bank and the IMF has to push all of these countries to go through the structural adjustment programs as a way of really fundamentally reshaping the economies so that the fundamental of the economy can actually generate growth that can alleviate poverty and allow this country to move forward. Because think about it, 1960s, when Nigeria got independence or Kenya got independent, they were richer than South Korea. They were richer than Singapore. They were richer than Malaysia. But then by the 1980s, these countries were getting poorer every single year. They were not doing anything to remove poverty. Poverty was actually increasing. Whereas if you look in South Korea and Malaysia, these countries were industrializing. They were becoming, very rich countries in a very, very, very short time. So there was a huge problem. And what was that problem? Mismanagement of the economy. It's not a record sign. Mismanagement of the economy. Having dictators that use violence and military power to prevent critics from exposing the truth, that suppress the distribution of information, and that use these corrupt tactics of manipulation of the exchange rate and the currency and the goods market so that a few individuals are able to get the money in their pockets. So this was not a new thing. And people were shocked that a country like South Sudan that was getting its independence in the 21st century, in the second decade of the 21st century, was repeating the same old mistakes when it had a lot of economists, people with knowledge and experience and expertise that can avoid all of these mistakes from being made. So the donors, they met with the government, and there was a series of negotiations. It began in the summer, and there was a negotiation about fundamental changes to the economy because donors were threatening that they're going to pull their development support out if the government does not change its behavior, because this was just rewarding a very few people to get rich while the rest of the country was being made bankrupt. Imagine if you had your money in South Sudanese pounds at a bank, and this happened to a lot of people. If you kept millions of dollars in millions of South Sudanese pounds at the Kenyan Commercial Bank or at the Equity Bank or any of the local banks in South Sudan, and the government was printing the money, was inflating the currency, and the currency was getting out of control, what do you think was happening to your money? Your money was losing value every single day. You were literally getting poorer. Every night you go to bed, you wake up poorer. That was what happening. And only those who had access to the central bank, those who had access to the Qatar National Bank, those who had access to, KCB and equity, these were the only individuals that were getting richer. So the donors, they negotiated, and there was now going to be a series of reforms that have to be done, including in the labor, in the civil service, in the budget management, in terms of, macroeconomic policies at the central bank. And this was going very well, which culminated in the so-called investment conference that happened in the beginning of December. I think it was like December 2nd to December 4th, where all kinds of investors from around the world came in, and people were now focusing. But there was this simmering tension that was going on in the SPLM. And by the time Elijah Malok left, we had about $5 billion in the bank. Now, through this mismanagement, I think the money by then, we have already finished like $3 billion. So we left like with $2 billion. And then, obviously, what happened? Salva Kiir wanted to control the SPLM. He did not want to democratize the party. And the party reached a deadlock. And there were three major issues. One was, how was the election going to happen in the SPLM? Salva Kiir wanted a show of hand. Show of hand, And the SPLM used to do secret ballot. All of a sudden, he won a show of hand. Number two was the position that were going to be elected, the position of the chairman, deputy, secretary general, and others that were happening. And he himself, you should have remembered, when he was made deputy of John Garang, he was not appointed. He was elected by the convention. All of a sudden, only the chairman should be elected. The rest of the people will be appointed by the chairman. And then the third issue was how the delegates to the convention were going to be nominated. Instead of delegates being entirely elected, as it should be in a real democratic party, he wanted to appoint the delegates, a percentage of the delegates. So all of this, led to tensions, and boom, the war broke out in December 2013. By the time the war broke out, because we had shut down the oil in February 2012, and now and then we returned it back on in September, right? So the productivity has been going on steadily. By the time we reached the December 2013, we were producing about 270,000 barrels of oil per day, right? And we had not yet reached the peak of 350. And by the way, since that time, we have never reached the peak of 350,000 barrels per day. So we are going up steadily. Productivity is going steadily. People are talking about building a refinery, making all these investment. Boom, the war broke out. And what happened with the war? Well, the SPLMIO decided to shut down the oil in Bentiu. So all of a sudden, the productivity, boop, went back down because all the wells in the Bentiu were shut down. And then we have a problem with revenues. Now, because the government is fighting a war, we have to shift into a war economy. And all of a sudden, it became about buying arms. And then, you know, that Riek Machar was approaching Juba and he was going to take over Juba. So Salva Kiir has to hire the Ugandan military to come in and do the fighting for him. So he's start paying Museveni $30 million per month so that he can come and help to fight the war. And then Museveni, you know, being thinking outside the box, asked the government of Uganda to pay for the war. So then he pocket the money that he's receiving from South Sudan. This is basically what was happening, my people. This is just 1 second. Yeah. So this is basically what began happening, and obviously, the economic situation completely changed. Even in the budget at the time, although there was little that we were allocating to capital investment, now it became entirely zero. And then, although there were reforms, by the way, in December 2013, there were reforms that happened to the exchange rate. You know, what happened? The government finally decided that instead of fixing the exchange rate, we were going to allow the exchange rate to be determined by the market fundamentals. That is, to allow the exchange rate to go up so that we completely eliminate the black market rate. Again, the intention was very good, right? This is the way it's supposed to happen, especially if you're an import-dependent economy. Now, at the beginning of the talk, I mentioned about how China does this. What China actually does is to make sure its currency is weaker than it appears. And what does that do? It makes it difficult. It makes the export cheaper. And it makes import, the goods that you buy from other countries, look so expensive. So your people would rather buy the whatever product that are produced here locally instead of buying things that are coming from outside. And there is genius in that. Right? The genius is the only way that you can accumulate wealth in your own country is to make sure that you are selling your products, whatever you produce in your own country, to the rest of the world. That is why if you look at a country like Japan, they don't have oil, they don't have any natural resources, but what they produce are products that they sell to America, to Europe, to wherever in the world, right? Because then the money is flowing in to your country. Right? On the other, but for South Sudan, what we were doing was we were making the currency artificially strong, right? We were making the currency stronger than it should be. And what was that doing? It was making import, the products that are coming from outside, cheaper, right? So instead of buying food products from Ye, which was still producing food, or from Yambio, it's cheaper to buy products that are coming in from Uganda. Instead of buying tilapia from Terekeka or from Jonglei or from Yorul, it's easy to buy the tilapia from Lake Victoria. And all of a sudden now we were suppressing our own economy. You know, the country was entirely suffering from what we call in economic the Dutch disease. That is when oil crowd out any other economic activity in the country, and it became the only thing. So everything else that people were doing, livestock, even the terrible Ugandan cows, they were cheaper than our own cows. So we were importing beef from Uganda instead of us exporting beef, because we are the country that is endowed with so much cattle and so much animal wealth that our people could be making a lot of money by selling to the rest of the world rather than by importing. So literally, all our money that we get from the oil, it was just fleeing and leaving our economy. And this had been happening for a long time also, because a lot of families whose husbands and wives were working in Juba, these people, their families were staying in East Africa. So every month you send the money for your wife to go and pay the rent, for the kids to go to school, and all of this thing. That is what was happening. So South Sudan, in the words of PLO Lumumba, became the hunting ground, right? It's a place where you go and hunt. You hunt for the loot. Once you made a kill, you make some money, then you go to Kenya and you go and eat your hunt. You don't eat it in South Sudan. So everybody that was in Juba that was working was literally hunting for money. And once they make that money, they go to East Africa, and that is where they go and spend the money. Right? Is it a wonder that then the country end up where it is? So that is what then has continued and continues since then. The reason why I brought up this topic is because of the situation that we are about to go through again. Now, obviously, later on, I think much later on, I think 2017, 2018, the IMF and the central bank have been negotiating, and the printing has stopped. So they have not been printing any more money. But still, because of the excess availability of South Sudanese pounds in the market, and you know very well, they continue introducing new notes. Remember, at the 2011, the highest note we had was 50. Then they introduced 100. And then I think now they have like 500, and they just keep on going. Basically, the currency becoming useless. And what was interesting about this, in 2012, when they were talking about shutting down the oil, because when I was a student, 2006 was an epic year for me. I studied abroad in Egypt. I did a research project in Lebanon. I spent some time in Dubai. And I traveled a lot all over Africa. And one of the places that I visited was Zimbabwe. When I visited Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe was experiencing, and is still experiencing, hyperinflation. So hyperinflation is when the prices literally are changing by minutes and by hour. In fact, if you take a taxi at the time when in Zimbabwe, if you take taxi, it's better to pay when you get in. Because if you take your ride and say your ride takes 15 or 20 minutes, by the time you get out of the taxi, the price have already increased. When you come to a bar, right? Let's say you want to go and have a nice time at a bar, and you want to buy beer. What you do is you gotta pay as you gotta buy beer all at once, because if you say you're gonna buy one at a time, the price will be changing every 30 minutes, going up. So what you do is you enter to a bar and you kind of estimate. You say, okay, I'm gonna take maybe 4 beers for the night, or 5, and then you buy them all at once, because if you wait until that time, the price will go up. So I came back with 2 notes. One note was 200 billion Zimbabwe dollars. I used to keep it in my wallet as a souvenir, and I wanted to be a warning of what to avoid. And then another note that I got was 1 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. So when the South Sudanese government was talking about shutting down the oil, I gave the $200 billion note to Dr. Riek Machar. And I said, my friend, this is a warning about how mismanagement of the currency can completely destroy the economy. Right? And then I gave the $1 trillion note to President Kiir. I don't know what he has done with it, but this was supposed to be a reminder of how when you mess up with the macroeconomic fundamentals, especially the currency, you take your country back many, 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 many decades. This was 2012. So by then, they did not listen to any of these things, and the mistakes continue to repeat themselves. So now by 2017, 2018, the IMF now reined them in, and they started providing them support for currency management as well as balance of payment support. Why are we talking about this today? You know that, was it yesterday, the election commission was sworn in. South Sudan is talking about holding election in December. And this election, we don't know how exactly they're going to be financed. What I can tell you for sure is this. I will be very surprised if the United States pay a single dollar for this election. It's not because they don't support democracy. U.S. is all about supporting democracy. But what Kiir is doing in Juba is not democracy. He doesn't want some people to participate in the elections. He's not opening up the political space, continuing to arrest people. is not implementing the peace agreement faithfully. So he's basically trying to organize sham election that only he will be able to win. I can also tell you, I will be very shocked if the United Kingdom is able to pay for this election. I will also be very shocked if Norway pays for this election. And I will be very shocked if European Union pay for this election. So who's going to pay for them? Well, it's not China. They don't even hold election in their own country. I can tell you it's definitely not going to be Russia, although I know government has been moving closer to Moscow. There's no way you're going to ask Kenya to pay for the election. They don't even pay for their own election. You're not going to ask Uganda to pay for election. They don't even pay for their own elections. Who's going to pay? Well, South Sudan will have to pay. If they want to do sham election, let them pay for the sham election. But you know very well we are now in January, and many of you that work in the government have not yet received your salaries. Why? Because there is no money. Over the last 2 months, they've been moving around the world, begging, trying to borrow. Nobody is willing to give them anything. They have already sold the oil in advance. Everybody knows that. They have borrowed money of a lot of people that they have not paid back. And right now, you can't really be sure that the oil is going to continue for long, because there is war in Sudan. And any of the warring parties at any time can begin to say, Juba, I need you to pay me, and only me. And if you pay the other guy, I'm going to shut it down. So you don't really have a real collateral that you can use to get loans. And you have sold it so much, right? This is why they're having difficulties paying salaries. And I want to tell everyone that is watching, this situation of salaries not being paid is not going to change for the better. In fact, it will continue to get worse. So you should get used to volunteering for the government. That is because this is what is going to happen. This is going to be a volunteer job. You're not going to get paid unless they begin printing the money again, right? Don't forget, the central bank is there. All they got to do is buy the ink, buy the paper, and then turn the printers on, boom, print the money. What is that going to do? It's going to take us back to where we were. At some point in 2016, inflation was at 800%, the rate at which the prices were changing. So I am talking about this because the management of currency is one of the most important things. If you want to destroy your country very fast, there are two things you can do. One is to start a war, which of course Salva Kiir did. The second thing that you can do is to mismanage your currency. Because what that does is it gets rid of all the savings in the country. The savings become nothing. All the value of assets, boom, come down. Now if you want to sell a house in Juba, the house that you built for $200,000, if you sell it, if you're lucky, you're probably going to get $100,000 or maybe even less. So the value of everything goes down. You make the population poorer. And if you look at the indicator, this is exactly what you see. When we got our independence in 2011, poverty rate was only 50% of the population. What is it now? 90%. And I guarantee to you, if nothing changed, by the end of this 2024, it will be 95%. Majority of the people will be completely reduced to poverty. Doesn't matter you are a general, you call yourself a director, director general in whatever, unless if you become a pure matograph and begin practicing the politics of the belly, you basically go and bend your knee down in front of Bull Mill or the Nile Pat guy or in the presidency, or you look up some of the guys that are, these hustlers guys that are doing, things in the market, chances are you will not be able to sustain yourself. So this is what is happening. You could see none of this was inevitable. Everything that I have talked about could have been prevented. All we needed was good leadership. And what we didn't have was good leadership. We were led by a clueless leader that understands zero about economics and how economy work. A guy that understands zero about leadership. A guy that is completely unqualified to run the country. He became the one running our country. And because of that, people perish. He lacked a vision. And although he was provided one in the form of Vision 2040, he had not faith to implement it. The only thing that he's capable of, politics of the belly. Politics of the belly. And his strategy is to turn the entire public into matograp and psychopaths. So the question is up to you, people of South Sudan. If this is what you want to continue doing, if this is the kind of life that you want, or can you do better? Can there be change? I believe there must be change because our country is wealthy, is a rich nation. All it needs is sound management. Even the most richest entity in the world, if given to an idiot to manage, it will become useless. What has happened in South Sudan is we were unlucky to lose John Garang at the critical time we needed him. And we ended up with a leader that simply had no understanding of what is leadership, has no understanding of the importance of leadership. And all he knew, politics of the belly. So he's continuing to fill his belly. And that is why you see all these projects. The SPLM nomination, whatever. Okay, millions of dollars is spent. They couldn't even bribe the people that they're supposed to bribe. They'll go and do a fake rally. Right? Look at the rally that happened in Jonglei recently. That rally, apparently, it was supposed to cost $10 million. But if you look at it, was there a $10 million spent? Not even $100,000 was spent. What happened to the rest of money? Divided among people, pocketed. So it's a country of everybody is take as much as you want. Mojrodu. You just take, you grab, you take. That is the policy coming from the top. And even when someone like me talk, they'll be like, why is he talking and his father is in the government? So they expect that whoever our relatives that are with them, that those relatives are eating on our behalf. And since there is somebody eating on your behalf, my father is in the government, my uncle Michael McQuinluet is in the government, those people should be eating on my behalf. It doesn't work like that, my people. We must rid this country of the politics of belly. We need politics of ideas. We need politics of development, politics of progress. And it starts with removing Salva Kiir. If we don't remove him, and I keep repeating this, if we don't remove them, there is no future for South Sudan. This guy must be removed. And we cannot allow him to continue to divide the people. He has to be removed because this country is wealthy. All it needs is sound management. We can attract investment. And the reason why this guy is not interested in real investment, I came with a project of building 50,000 modern houses in each of the capitals of the state. And in Juba, 100,000. I mobilize financiers, companies from all over the world. He's not interested because you cannot loot. This will actually create jobs for the young people. It will transform the face of the country. It will give our people skills. It will empower our people. They will get their pride back. He doesn't want that. He wants to turn people of South Sudan into slaves. People that only will be begging for him. People that are afraid of their lives. You cannot be free if you are a coward. Julius Caesar said, a coward dies so many times before their death. Because each time that you are afraid, you die. You die how? Morally. Morally. You lose your dignity. You lose the essence of who you are. And that is what he's doing to the people of South Sudan. Is diluting our morals. Turning a country to a country of psychopaths, a country of prostitutes, a country of murderers. We have tolerated this guy for 19 years. It's time that we end his crime. So, my people, that is what happened to your currency. And I hope the printing doesn't start again, because already it's a huge problem. It can even become worse. The only way we can end this is by removing him. And how we remove him is up to each and every one of you. It doesn't matter whether you are old, you are a woman, you are a young person. This requires all of us. It is an intergenerational struggle. Every single one has a role to play. We have the glorious legacy of the SPLM from the war to protect. A glorious legacy of the sacrifice of 2 million of our people. Some of you are still alive. You have bullet wounds in your body. You went to fight the enemy, and now you have been reduced to a slave. Is that how you want your story to end? A story of a freedom fighter that spent 21 years in the bush against the enemy, fighting for freedom, only for one of their own to turn them into slaves, into psychopaths, into mathograbs. Always pamke what? Huh? Pamke nonsense? You expect people to pump nonsense? Is that how you want your story to end? It's up to each one of you. So let me repeat. If you are a soldier, you have a gun. That gun is not only for protecting Kir, it's for protecting South Sudan, protecting the future of South Sudan. We will need it. If you are a journalist, your pen is not just for writing psychopathic nonsense to please individuals and engage in the politics of belly. It can be used as a tool for freedom. If you are a politician, you should not just be begging. I saw some MP was proposing extension of 5 years. That is politics of the belly. Let's not allow that. Use your voice, use your platform to advocate for freedom, a change that can allow the people of South Sudan to reclaim their self-worth and their value as a people. If you are living in diaspora, your job is not just only to continue to pay money and send people so that you have create this huge dependency on you. Let's think about a permanent solution. That money, we will need it to take our country back. Regardless of where you are, if you're a bishop, that prayer should be used for freedom. Let God Almighty support us. And I'm very sure, my people, if we remain united, if we work with one heart, and we work with the spirit of sacrifice, we can be able to take this country forward. So that's what happened with our currency. It has been a pleasure to talk with you. Please share the video, whether you are a patriot or you are paid to write mathograph, doesn't matter. Share the video, make your comments, and let the conversation continue. Write your views, share your views, engage with each other, and let's continue learning, and let's continue engaging in a conversation. This is the year we are removing Salva Kiir, and each one of you has a role to play. Kiir must be removed. Thank you very much.